So now with this video, I'm gonna do something a little bit different. Now it wouldn't feel right if I didn't do this. My hand on the right way. It didn't feel right if I didn't do this. And the ones that know me, Universal Studios is perhaps the bigger picture of all the Universal Studios parks, but mainly Universal Studios Florida. In the background, posters in the background. Mainly Universal Studios Florida. It's one of my favorite places on earth. I know there's been different videos covering the history and everything that I've been seeing on YouTube, but I'm gonna take a different approach to this. In honor of the 30th anniversary of Universal Studios Florida and my 30th birthday, that already happened this year, so don't say happy birthday to me. If you was, do it then. Say happy birthday. But I present to you me and Universal. That's the name of this video. So go and watch it. Oh, you're already watching it. But that's how much a fan I am. I even screen printed a shirt of confrontation. Screen print if you can even see it. You might see it later whenever I go back down to Universal. Hopefully this year, but yeah, like I said, big fan. Posters in the background, more on the way, more merchandise over there, like birth brochures and all that stuff. I got it all. Like I said, if it wasn't for this trip down to Universal, this channel wouldn't be possible. So, I was gonna say something else, but I'll save it for later. This channel, well, this video is gonna be on 2 different channels. My other channel. So, yeah. Goodbye. Finish watching the video. Bye. The history of Universal Studios Florida starts in 1982. MCA, Universal's parent company at the time, wanted to expand outside of Hollywood. The idea was to build a theme park and studios in the swampy lands of Central Florida, a first in the business. At first, to build a park from the ground up, but the plans would be put on hold until 1986. One of the reasons why Universal put the project on hold because they wanted a partner to assist with the expensive production costs that they would have to pay. And they thought the perfect candidate for a partner would be Paramount Studios, who at the time was led up by Michael Eisner, the future CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Better than I. But they didn't proceed. They backed out. Another reason why Universal backed out of the project in 1982, they felt they couldn't compete with Disney on Disney's home turf. And by this time, Disney already had Epcot and the Magic Kingdom in Central Florida. In 1986, talks of the theme park was brought back on the table. Universal and MCA officials and director Steven Spielberg conducted a meeting, and in this meeting, they spoke about the creation of a Back to the Future similar ride, and also a ride based on the 1976 film King Kong. Spielberg also thought it was a good idea for Universal to build a park in Central Florida to rival their rivals, Disney and now SeaWorld. He also wanted the best his good friend George Lucas, who was working with Disney at the time, Captain EO, and other projects. The major component for this new Universal Park was to take pieces of the Universal Studios Hollywood studio tour, like the shark attack from Jaws Encounter, and make them a larger standalone attraction. He also wanted to make a longer attraction to the newly King Kong Encounter that was also in the studio backlot. Also, this new park will have a smaller studio tour. The land clearing for the park began in 1986 with an announcement at Universal Studios Hollywood and a grand ceremony that the park will open in December of 1989. In addition to riding the rides and riding the movies, the popular kids network Nickelodeon will jump on the project, creating the company's first very own studio dedicated to the production, thus delaying the opening from the park from 1889 to May 1st, 1990. In 1988, Universal would allow the guests to witness the production of TV shows and films in the new park, newly built sound stations. Also, some of the guests caught a glimpse of the new park construction and stood in wow. Later, in 1988, MCA/Universal found themselves in a mild beef, as I like to call it, with its rival, Disney. Universal would accuse Walt Disney Company for stealing Universal's concept of Universal Studios Florida and using it for their own park in the newly opened Disney MGM Studios down the road. My guys have denied any wrongdoing. He probably did. As we all know, we know Disney's devoid of ideals. Look around at Disney. And for any of your deniers out there. Back to the story. Universal's opening date was moved from May 1st, 1990 to June 7th, 1990. The park would begin soft openings in late May. But the grand opening festival ceremony wouldn't open until June 7th. The crowds were out. Helicopters, news anchors, police cars, tanks. Okay, maybe not tanks, but everyone was out to experience the new park. The grand opening had the stars out, shining and stunting. The park opened with 5 theme lands that circled around the lagoon. Production Central, modeled after their studio backlot. First of the lands, other than the main entrance, contained the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera, based on the famous characters from Flintstones to the Jetsons to Scooby-Doo, and to many others. The other attractions in this area: Alfred Hitchcock, the art of making movies, the Boneyard, an outdoor attraction featuring large props and movies, particularly Universal's, of course, particularly showing Bruce the Shark, the mechanical shark. The MCA Recording Studio, Murder, She Wrote Mystery Theater, the Production Studio Tour, and Nickelodeon Studios. Travel North is New York City, based on different eras of New York City. And in New York City, there was Confrontation, the flagship ride of the park. The dark ride was based on the 1976 film King Kong. In this ride, the guests were encountered the 8th wonder of the world, roaming the Big Apple, more than destroying the Big Apple. The other attraction in New York was the Ghostbusters Spectacular, based on the Ghostbusters series of the 80s. Next to New York, traveling west in a sort of way, is San Francisco and Anemone Island. The flagship land and ride was Earthquake, the big one, based on the 1974 disaster film Earthquake, starring Charles Heston himself. Next to the Earthquake was the American Tail Theater, Fido Goes West. Yes. In Anemone Island, the main center of the 1904 horror film Jaws, with Jaws the ride as the main centerpiece. On this boat ride, the guests encounter the shark, the Red Bruce the Shark. Rounding out the 2 lands was the World Expo in Hollywood. The World Expo opened with E.T., based on Spielberg's 1982 film E.T. Other attractions were the Bates Mansion and motel sets. The Hard Rock Cafe opened months before the park opened. In Hollywood, only had one attraction: the gory, the gruesome, the grotesque makeup show. Now known as the Universal Horror Makeup Show that still stands today. Much of the theme of Hollywood is based on old Hollywood, known landmarks such as Beverly Hotel and the Brown Derby. But everything didn't go so smoothly for Universal. Confrontation, Jaws, Earthquake, all suffered technical difficulties. Universal was forced to shut down Jaws for 3 years and sue the rights manufacturer, ride show, and engineering for a faulty ride. Universal didn't stop there. They would hire a totally fun company to redesign the ride that would open in 1993. Due to the technical difficulties, Universal gave the guests vouchers to revisit the park anytime. After the opening day failure, Universal will bounce back in the next year. In 1991, the park added more attractions: the Blues Brothers show, Street Busters, Screen Test home video, and How to Make a Mega Movie Deal. None of those attractions were compared to what was coming next.
Go back to the future. Don't settle for an imitation. Come to Universal Studios in Orlando, the only place on Earth where you can ride.
Coming next, the newly Back to the Future, the ride that opened the World Expo area in 91. The ride received positive reviews and became a fan favorite for years to come. 91 would be the first year of the annual Halloween horror event called Halloween Horror Nights, an event that the Lord franchise frequented himself every year up until this year. In 1993, due to the success Universal Studios Florida was having, the company's official planned to open up another park with hotels, and a resort. In 1995, the park studio was closed down for good due to low attendance, but the store that accompanied the tour, the Universal Studios store, will stay open until this day. For the 96 season, Universal will open up another attraction, not based on any IPs they have, but based on the beloved film, and one of the best action science fiction films and sequels of all time, Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
I said I'd be back.
Terminator 2 3D Battle Across Time. An incredible new way to ride the movies only at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Which would call Terminator 2 3D Battle Across Time. 3D attraction will basically be the true sequel to the movie, and not the others that came out after it. And many of the actors were reprised the roles, including Arnold himself. In the same year, a 6-year-old Lord franchise, the first, made its debut at the park after suffering many days at Disney World. The young nobleman had no clue on where he was and what he was doing. He was told to ride the rides. When he saw the park slogan, "Ride the movies," his imagination went somewhere else. He really thought he was in those movies. He really thought he would face a banana breath ape and go back in time. Lord franchise first ride at the park was the E.T.'s Adventure. He was deeply moved by the atmosphere of the queue line. The smell of the queue line was intoxicating and still is to him to this day. He couldn't believe he had a chance to meet E.T. E.T. said his name, and then he found out E.T. wasn't real. Even if E.T. wasn't real, Lord franchise was deeply moved. In total, Lord franchise would ride the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera, Back to the Future, another ride that moved him. And he had to spend a day with Barney per request of Lord franchise's younger sister, Lady Erica. Lord franchise tried to get on confrontation, but couldn't find it for some reason. Jaws was closed due to the rain. Nonetheless, Lord franchise did enjoy himself at the park and fell in love and hoped to return. And he did in 1999 with the Islands of Adventures instead. And the next year, Ghostbusters will be placed with special effects attraction based on the 1996 disaster film Twister. The attraction will be named Twister, Ride It Out. Basically, you experience a tornado in a building. The Hard Rock Cafe was closed, shunned for a new land, Woody the Woodpecker Zone, that incorporated E.T. Adventure and landed the park's first roller coaster, the Woody Woodpecker's Nut House Coaster. That's a bad name. City Walk will be constructed in front of the park, completing the gap in between the new park that was coming around the corner and the old park. In 2000, Universal will add Men in Black, Alien Attack in the World's Exos area. For some reason, Lord franchise thought Universal had an attraction dedicated to the beloved 300, or maybe not 300, all different forms of Godzilla, but he thought they had a Godzilla attraction there. He must have been dreaming. Sadly, Universal's special days were coming to a close. Let the downside begin.
To life. Nobody like Universal Studios, Florida, where the world rides the
New century, Universal Studios, it was starting to change. There was now a resort called the Universal Studio Escape, then changed its name to Universal Orlando Resort. After the events of September 11th, the park's attendant numbers started to dwindle, which gave Universal the motion to bring in the new and take out the old. Universal's parent company, MCA, was out of the picture via 1996. By now, Universal Studios was under Universal Studios Inc. General Electric was looming around, buying stake in Universal. Towards the end of 2001, Universal added in the Macy's Holiday Parade that were running in the New York section. Animal Planet Live was added. In 2002, Universal Studios flagship ride, a fan favorite, Confrontation, was closed for good. To this day, no one knows why the ride was shut down, but I can guess due to the high maintenance on the animatronics. And from what I heard, these machines were impressive and expensive in all their banana breath glory. Too bad Lord franchise never had a chance to ride the ride. Only the King Kong encounter in Hollywood before that burned down to smoldering smoke. And Skull Island reign of calm. Join in confrontation in the cemetery of theme park rides at Universal was the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera. Closed, kicked out of the way, replaced with a big-headed Jimmy Neutron Nicktoons Blast. Confrontation. This was the upside of confrontation going bye-bye. It was replaced by Revenge of the Mummy, based on the Brendan Fraser Mummy series, and probably one of the best indoor roller coasters on this planet. Shrek 4D opens in Production Central, placing another old-time ride. As the 2000s roll on, more 90s attractions followed confrontation to the grave. The Wild West Stunt Show, a stunt show in the world's expo area, became another victim, replaced by Fear Factor Live. In 2007, another fan favorite becomes the victim of this. Back to the Future. The first three of the coasters closed down, replaced by that adorable yellow family from Springfield. Then Earthquake, the fifth one, received the same treatment, but only changed by name and plot. Earthquake became Disaster, a major motion picture starring you. Opened December of 2007. Lady Erica was fortunate to star on this ride, along with The Rock and Christopher Walken. Universal Studios continued to keep changing until the end of the decade. By the end, Nickelodeon Studios shut down, moving back out west, becoming the Blue Man Group Center. Universal would install, I hate this, the Hollywood Rip Rocket Coaster, a coaster that gave Leon franchise a brief bout with amnesia. He couldn't remember his name or his date of birth, or he put his locker, or the locker combination, or how did he get to Orlando. That's how much the amnesia got to him. The Boneyard, the area in the production center displayed the old prop area, like the mechanical shark once mentioned earlier, gone, replaced by Universal Music Plaza stage. At the end of the decade, Comcast, in other words, you could call it the evil corporation, but Disney's more evil to me. Probably both fun to say, but anyway, that's not important. Comcast would acquire NBC Universal, sharing stake in Universal with GE. GE become the other big major staker. But this change, Universal was not done making moves. When the new decade began, Twister, Terminator 2, the Universal Horror Makeup Show, AET, were only the few rides that escaped the snap. Universal was changing rapidly, adding more outside IPs from Warner Brothers and DreamWorks. Jimmy Neutron went bye-bye, replaced by Despicable Me, Minion Mayhem, a screen ride. Transformers, the ride in 3D, a ride in Florida, a screen ride, Animal Simulator. Unfortunately, another 90s ride was given the axe. Jaws, the ride, was closed to make way for Harry Potter's Diagon Alley. Jaws, the ride will live on in Universal Studios Japan. I must say, Diagon Alley is very impressive, with detail, immense detail, but at the same time, only to me, it doesn't fit Universal. Maybe it's just me once again, but it makes it feel like a Disney park. It really does. But Disney had their chance, and they fumbled worse than Adrian Peterson on the 1-yard line, something Disney does so much these days. Lord franchise never had a chance to encounter Jaws the ride, only at the studio tour in Hollywood. Many changes continue at the park. Disaster and Twister, both were given their walk-in patrons, each replaced by a subpar attraction. First, Twister is replaced by Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon, a subpar ride with screens and Jimmy Fallon. But I will admit, the queue line to this ride is amazing. It almost feels like you're in the ABC studio in New York. Lord franchise was not impressed by it, of course. Disaster, and also the long-standing Beetlejuice Rock and Roll Graveyard was replaced by the Not So Fast and Furious Supercharged. Something Lord franchise has yet to conquer, but what for me years is similar to the Fast and Furious Supercharged in Hollywood on the studio tour. Slow, boring, Like I said before, Kong did make a comeback in Florida in the form of Skull Island, the reign of Kong and Islands of Adventure, but nothing close to what Confrontation was. Interviews with people who rode the ride back in the day. That's all I needed to know. In 2017, Terminator 2 3D was terminated, replaced by another action movie of the Universal IP, Born Spectacular, that opened on June 30th, 2020. Now, at its 30th year mark, the E.T. Adventure is the only opening day ride left, and I'm not counting the horror makeup show. As long as Spielberg lives, E.T. lives. The future of Universal Studios, it will continue, but it will have to share attendance with not only Islands of Adventure, but the new up-and-coming park down the road, Epic Universe, set to open in 2003 or 2024. We don't know to this yet. In this park, more Jurassic Park, more Harry Potter, more DreamWorks, even Super Nintendo. But the good thing about it, Universal Monsters will have its land. Franchise feelings for this park really hasn't changed too much. Yes, it sucks that rides from the 90s are gone, but it's somewhat understandable. Sometimes you just have to move on from the past and move to the future. The only thing with Universal Parks, they've gotten too kiddish for Lord Franchise and some of his fellow cohorts. I think added in too many DreamWorks attractions has made not soft, but I can't really explain it. With the new additions coming in, Lord Franchise hopes Universal will go back to its roots a little. Heck, it's even wishful thinking here with him. Somehow, I'm only saying this, somehow, some way, I know it's not going to happen, but it's more of a fantasized dream. A dream that DC is stolen from AT&T by Universal and Comcast. But that's least likely to happen. But Lord Franchise says this, I'm not for his first trip to Universal Studios Florida as that 6-year-old. Franchise History TV wouldn't be possible. It was on this trip, the 1996 trip. The ruler of this channel became acquainted with Jurassic Park. He was watching Jurassic Park on the way down to Florida. Terminator, and so many other IPs at this park. After a 3-year hiatus, Lord Franchise hopes to return to the park for his Winter of Steve trip. And he just wants to tell the park he misses it and he loves it deeply. Okay, enough with the jokes. Sign it off.
Hasta la vista, baby.